Welcome into Hitting Hard with Jon Chuckery here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Today on the show, what is the biggest area of improvement for the Falcons this offseason? Two questions that I have for Tony and the Road Warriors. It's all next. It's Hitting Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked On Sports Atlanta.
This is Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
Hitting Hard is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. We ask you to subscribe, or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. You can get the latest episodes of Hitting Hard as soon as they become available. And then give me a follow on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. So what do I think is the biggest area that the Falcons have improved in, right? And I think that they have made improvements all across the board. I think they're obviously better at their skill positions. I think that they're should be better on their offensive line. I still have some questions about left guard, but obviously bringing back McGarry, adding Matthew Bergeron, I think that was good pieces to obviously bring back and add to. Defensive line, certainly no doubt about it. You think that they're going to be better in the pass rush. So that's a good thing, right? I mean, we've talked a lot about that. But if I had to pick one position that I think the Falcons have improved at the most, it's their secondary. Now, obviously losing Casey Hayward, that was a guy that I had wanted to keep around, even if the Falcons were going to draft cornerback at 8. And I understand why they moved on from Hayward. He's a little bit older. He was banged up last year. You can save $5 million, on the cap. But certainly he's a guy that when you look at, maybe was getting, to that point of his career that, you don't know exactly how much he's going to start or how much he can certainly be around. So when I look at the secondary for the Atlanta Falcons, I think this is the biggest area that they have improved in. So I look at Jeff Okudah, Mike Hughes, okay? I look at guys like that, but I also look at guys like Clark Phillips that they drafted. So when you talk about adding pieces, I think Mike Hughes could and probably will be an upgrade over what Isaiah Oliver was. Okudah, if he can get some things figured out, could be a pretty sizable upgrade, even over Casey Hayward. And look, you don't have a lot invested in some of these guys. So if Jeff Okudah doesn't work out and the Falcons only have less than $4 million invested in Okudah, then again, if he doesn't work out, you move on from him. If he does, now you have a guy that is the number 3 pick formerly in the draft in the 2020 season. Maybe he can be a player. But when I look at overall the depth of what this secondary is, obviously Jesse Bates, another guy that was their big money free agent guy to go along with Hawkins and Grant. So I think with the additions of Jesse Bates, Clark Phillips in the draft, Jeff Okudah, Mike Hughes, potentially your starting nickel corner. And then you look at some of the guys that are here already, right? Like I know that these guys are rotational guys, and they're not necessarily guys that you're going to rely on big things for. But Cornell Armstrong is a guy that comes to mind. Now, the first time we saw Cornell Armstrong, he was having to go out and guard Jamar Chase, right? And that did not go very well. Because of injuries and things to A.J. Terrell, Casey Hayward, we had to have Cornell Armstrong go out there and try to shut down Jamar Chase. But I will say that Cornell Armstrong did play better throughout the season. What was he great or anything like that? No, but I mean, he was a serviceable guy for the Atlanta Falcons. And when you look at some of the guys that are back end of the rotation guys, the D. Alfords, the Cornell Armstrongs, I do think that those guys made some improvements throughout the year. So when I look at, obviously another couple of guys, Hawkins and Grant, you hope that they're going to continue to grow and they're going to continue to be better. I think Richie Grant was certainly better in his second year than his rookie year. He played a lot more. I think Jalen Hawkins is a guy who has grown every year in this system with the Falcons. So when I look at the combination of the pieces that they added, the pieces they drafted, guys that are improving that they currently have, I think that the secondary for the Falcons overall has had the best improvement or the greatest improvement on this defensive, scheme, that kind of a rebuilt defense for the Atlanta Falcons. So I'm excited to see, because if they can get to the quarterback, their secondary will be just that much better. And I'm not one of those people that believes that, well, if I have a really good secondary, that improves my pass rush. Either you have guys that can get to the quarterback or you don't. And I don't believe that it's 1978 again, where you run two guys out in a pattern and that's all you got to cover. And if you have two good, really man corners, you can shut everybody down. Nowadays, you're running 3, 4, 5 guys all over the field, right? All kinds of different patterns. And if you give a quarterback enough time, any quarterback in the NFL can pick you apart. We've seen below average quarterbacks that have had success against our defense, not because they're great players or this, and the other, but if you give a guy in the NFL the time to throw, if you give a guy in the NFL, they'll pick you apart. You can't cover everybody for an extended period of time. So if we can get that pass rush going, if we can get the pass rush with our front, with the additions of Onyemata and obviously Arnold Ebiketie stepping up this year, and Harrison that they drafted, just the combination of pieces that we have, if that can be better, then I think our secondary can be a really big strength for this team going forward. So I like the additions that they've made to their secondary, whether it's drafting Clark Phillips, whether it's trading for Jeff Okudah, signing Jesse Bates, signing Mike Hughes. You don't have a lot of risk involved in some of those guys, but I thought that they were all solid moves. So when I look at what is going to be the greatest area of improvement, or I think the thing that they have improved the most at on their defense, I will take their defensive backfield. I will take their secondary. And I think that they've done enough things to, that I think we were last in the NFL in pass defense last year. If we can get guys home and we can sack the quarterback much more. I mean, obviously we can't sack the quarterback a whole lot worse, but if we can sack the quarterback better, then our secondary will be that much better. And I like the additions. I like the Okudah trade. You don't have a lot of high risk involved in it, but if these guys pay off at the end of the day, they could be something special. And I hope that their secondary has improved greatly, because that was certainly one of the real weaknesses on our defense from last year. All right, let's talk about our friends over at Built Bar. Listen, Built Bar, everybody's looking for healthier snacks, healthier alternatives when you're looking in the snack game world, right? So you don't want all the high calorie, high sugar, high carb types of snacks. Built Bar's got you covered. So whether you go with traditional protein bars or whether you go with the protein-infused marshmallow puffs, Built Bar has got you with all of your great flavors that you want, coming out with new flavors every single month. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, but a whopping 17 grams of protein in each Built Bar. So now you have multiple options with how you can buy your Built Bars. So if you want to go online to built.com and check out all their extensive flavors, the wide variety and selection that they have, you can go online, built.com, and order your Built Bars and then wait for them to come. But if you're more impatient and you want to go to the store, then you can go to the pharmacy section of Walmart, or you can head to Sam's Club. So whether you want to go the brick and mortar route and pick your Built Bars up right away at Walmart and Sam's Club, or if you want to go online and have the ease and convenience of going to built.com and shopping for your protein bars there, either way, you can get your hands on one of the best snacks that's out there. And obviously, low calorie, low sugar, low carb, but high protein, as everybody's trying to eat healthier for this year, go to built.com today or go to Walmart or Sam's Club now and pick up your box of Built Bars. So there are two questions that I have for Tony Ressler. Okay. And it's not that complicated. Okay. But here's the couple of things that I want to know from Tony Ressler going into the offseason. Okay. So if I'm going to sit down and I'm going to put the Wonder Woman lasso of truth around Tony Ressler, and I'm going to sit down and ask him these two questions, here's what I want to know. Okay. Number one, are we going into the luxury tax this season? Now, I know what Tony Ressler has said in the past about the idea of, well, we'll go in the luxury tax when it makes sense and blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's all fine and dandy. Okay. But that doesn't solve the immediacy of, are we going in the luxury tax now? Because when you look at this roster, if you just take the core group of players that the Hawks have, they're going into the luxury tax with DeAndre Hunter, Trey, Capella, Collins, everybody that is just the core group of the players. Without adding anybody to this roster, they're in the luxury tax. And I understand that, we're collaborative, we're communicative, we're, all these buzzwords that we have as far as what our organization is and things like that. But I need to know, am I going in the luxury tax this year? My buddy Brad Rowland talked about this on my radio show last night. It's hard to get good and cheap, right? It's hard to get good and build a better roster without spending money and with cutting payroll. That's a hard thing to do. And so if the Hawks are not willing to get into the luxury tax, then they're going to have to move on from a Collins or a Capella or a Hunter. They're going to have to move on from at least one of those pieces to get themselves under the luxury tax threshold. So that's the first question that I want to know. Tony Ressler, are you going in the luxury tax this year? Not when it's, the right time, not when it's, makes sense and all not when it's collaborative, not when it's communicative. Are you going in the luxury tax this year? That's my first question. Then my second question to Tony Ressler would be, Tony, where is Quin Snyder in the pecking order of decision making as far as how the roster is going to be constructed? Now, I know that the Hawks mantra from Landry Fields and everybody, in between, we've heard from, Tony Ressler and things like that. Oh, well, Quin Snyder is just here to coach. Okay. All right. Can I tell you that I don't believe that bunk, bull, and malarkey for just a second? I don't believe in all that. Listen, the way you got Quin Snyder to come off the beach, off a vacation, to come coach this team 3/4 of the season, okay, when you basically just had a handful of games that were left, 21 games that were left in the regular season and the playoffs, okay, the way you got him to come here and be a part of this organization was to promise him some kind of personnel decision, say, whether it was, again, I don't think it's going to be president of basketball operations, but something to have an influence over this roster, because that's the one thing that he did not get when he was in Utah. The one thing that, and I talked to the play-by-play guy, I talked to the beat writers, the one thing that they said was that he did not have any real say in how the roster was going to be constructed. And that's something that Quin Snyder wanted to have a hand in. Now, excuse me, as far as what level of hand that he's going to have involved, I don't know. I mean, could I believe that he has final say over the roster when it's all said and done? I could believe that. Okay. Do I believe that if it's Landry Fields, Kyle Korver, Nick Ressler, and then Quin Snyder, that he is a little bit down on the pecking order? I could sort of believe that as well. But the idea that he's not going to have a definite influence on this roster, I'm not buying that for a second. So when I look at this, and again, I don't care if Quin Snyder has his stamp all over this roster. I don't care if Quin Snyder is the guy who, yes, Landry Fields has the general manager title and the president of basketball operations title. But if Quin Snyder's pulling the strings behind the scene, I don't really care. Here's my thing. I just want it right. Okay. Like, I don't want to know how to make the watch. I just want to know what time it is. I don't want the labor pains. I just want the baby. And that's all I want at the end of the day. I just want this thing fixed. I just want to know that this team is going to be better when all is said and done. And if they think they're going to be better because Quin Snyder's pulling the strings, okay, fine. But this idea that they've sold on, well, he's just here to coach and different. Okay, he's not just here to coach. You don't pay a guy. You don't pay a guy who's had moderate success in the NBA, championship caliber coach money. And look, he was making the same kind of money that Nick Nurse, Budenholzer, Spoelstra, guys that have won championships. He was paid at that kind of level. And I don't think it was just a money grab. I certainly don't think that Quin Snyder was desperate for the money or he needed the money. He didn't need to come off the beach of wherever he was at and come coach this ragtag bunch of players. So I definitely think that there is going to be a strong influence. And we all heard about, the reason he's here now is because we want him to get into that. Okay, well, if you want him to evaluate the players, but you're not going to give him any personnel decision, what sense does that make? He could have done that. He could have done that coming into the summertime. But I don't buy this whole notion that Quin Snyder's just here to coach, as we've heard. I don't buy this thing that, well, he's just kind of he's going to have a definite say in personnel. He's definitely going to have a say in what goes on with this Atlanta Hawks roster, whether that's at the very top, whether that's somewhere in the middle, but he's going to have a definite influence as to how this roster is going to be constructed. So again, the two questions I want for Tony Ressler: are we going in the luxury tax next year? Not when it's convenient, not when it makes sense. Are we going in the luxury tax next year? And then number two is, where is Quin Snyder in the pecking order of personnel roster decision making when all is said and done? If I can get the answer to those two questions, then I'll have a better understanding about where this Hawks franchise is headed. Where is it going to end up? What is their mindset? Do they think they're a contender? Do they think they're a pretender? If I can get those two questions answered from Tony Ressler, I'll feel like that the Hawks are either more on solid footing or, maybe more on quicksand when all is said and done. We thank you so much for making Hittin' Hard your first listen every day. Make sure when you listen in that you go into our comment section of whatever platform that you're on and leave us a comment that you are an everyday listener. So if you're watching on YouTube, listening on one of our platforms, go in, leave us a comment, and let us know that you are an everydayer, as we like to say, an everyday listener to the program. So we thank you people greatly for being a part of our ever-growing community. So we thank you so much for always listening in and being that everyday listener to our shows. So the Braves won last night and beat the Marlins handily, 6-0. No real surprise there. Bryce Elder was fantastic. 7 innings, 3 hits, no runs, 6 strikeouts. But the remarkable thing about this Braves season isn't just that they're winning because of guys that are hurt, right? Even Matt Olson, who had a good game last night, 1 for 3, 2 runs scored, couple of walks. He'd been struggling over the last 13 games. Coming into last night, his last 13 games, he was hitting $152. Now, considering that they've only played 29 games before last night, that's a pretty good sample size of what the season is. But here's the remarkable thing about the Atlanta Braves. They truly are the road warriors, okay? Now, They're not Hawk and Animal. Okay, they don't have Paul Ellering walking them out. They're not coming. They're not coming out of the dugout to the Iron Man theme, right? I mean, they're not doing anything like that. They're not coming out with the spiked shoulder pads, and they're coming with the face paint and all this good stuff. But they are truly the road warriors of Major League Baseball. They currently now sit at 13-3 on the road. And you figure that, look, the Braves have always been a good organization, right? And the Braves are a really good roster this year. But the fact that you factor in the injuries and different things that have happened to this club, the fact that they're 13-3 on the road, that's going to pay huge dividends when we get into the actual meat of the season, into the actual summertime. A lot of people say, well, I don't look at baseball standings until Memorial Day and blah, 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 blah. Okay. All right. Well, whatever you want to do, Sparky, you can do whatever you want on it. But these are games that if you take care of your business now, and look, I don't care what the schedule has said, whether it's the Marlins, or the Mets, or, the Cincinnati Reds or whatever, well, that's the teams you've gone on the road and beaten. Look, 13-3 is 13-3. Pete Rose had a saying that he always said that, look, I don't care if you're playing in the chicken crap league, hitting 300 is hitting 300. Okay. Well, 13-3 on the road in Major League Baseball is 13-3 on the road. And, I should say, can't even talk about the teams. The Braves a few years ago, what was it, 2021? They had that 13-game road winning streak and all this, that, and the other. But I think that club only finished 47-34 on the road. I think they were only a total of 13 games above 500 on the road. So the fact that through 16 road games, this team is already 10 games above 500, when you can handle your business on the road, it just makes your life a whole lot easier. We talk about ways to make your life easier and kind of, I don't want to say cruise through the season, because it is a it is a slog and a grind of a season. But if you're that good on the road and you feel like you can go into any building and take 2 out of 3 from somebody, that tells you as to not just their talent, but their mindset as well. That gives you a sneaky peek about how serious they take this and how much that they are invested into being a really good road team. Because again, I don't care who you play on the road. If you're a Major League Baseball franchise and you start off 13-3 on the road, that's a remarkable feat. And when you factor in what all of the injuries that the Braves have suffered over the course of this season, it makes it even more remarkable. So hats off to the Braves.